In the long and colorful history of American politics, one of the most common and frequently catastrophic sins committed by national, state, and local candidates of every ideological stripe and partisan persuasion is the embellishment or exaggeration or puff-uppery or BSification, and occasionally the insertion of wholly fabricated elements into their resumes. And now, courtesy of the New York Times, we have the latest, and it should be said, a particularly gratuitous example in that long and ignoble tradition, and one that only furthers the perception that the Republican Party today is coming apart at the seams. If you're one of the tens of millions of Americans who has no idea who George Santos is, there's a quick primer. He is a young man, 34 years old, Congressman-elect, who will be representing parts of Long Island and Queens starting in January in the House of Representatives. His parents are immigrants from Brazil. He is gay. He is a pro-Trump Republican. And until last weekend, you almost certainly would have called him a rising star in the GOP firmament for all those reasons, plus this. The district that he won in November was carried by Joe Biden back in 2020 by a margin of 8 points. But here is where things start to come apart for Mr. Santos. The New York Times, with some reporting, trying to tie down, get to the bottom of some very basic details about Santos's past. Details that Santos built his winning campaign on, and the Times found some discrepancies. Quote, Citigroup and Goldman Sachs, the marquee Wall Street firms on Mr. Santos's campaign biography, told the New York Times that they had no record of his ever working there. Officials at Baruch College, which Mr. Santos has said he graduated from in 2010, could find no record of anyone matching his name and date of birth graduating that year. There was also little evidence that his animal rescue group, Friends of Pets United, was, as Mr. Santos claimed, a tax-exempt organization. The IRS could locate no record of a registered charity with that name. And that is just the beginning of the BS when it comes to Congressman-elect Santos. Let's bring in Politico White House Bureau Chief and host of MSNBC's Way Too Early, Jonathan Lemire, Tim Miller, Don Edwards. Back with us, three people with an incredible ability to sniff out bullshit. Jonathan, tell me, you want to give us what the official response, what the Santos response is via his lawyer to this story that has enveloped him over the last 48 hours. Let's get that response on the record from you, and then we'll go from there.
Well, John Howman, first of all, I'll say I now have new questions about your own resume now that in this fresh light of the accusations here against Mr. Santos. The lawyer, they're not saying much. They have issued a statement that really does not address or take on any of the accusations from this, what we should note is terrific reporting in the New York Times. But all sorts of questions are now being raised about exactly who this person is. It seems that most of his resume has been fabricated. His team disputes that, but they're not going tick by tick through his dossier, if you will, nor are they offering much in the way of information to corroborate who he is. So this is, we should note, would be a big deal at any time. Yeah. But I think it is certainly raising a lot of anger and frustration among Democrats because of this is a seat in New York State, which of course was the state that many blame. That if Democrats had simply done a little better there in what is normally a deep blue state, they might have been able to hang on to the House of Representatives.
John, I'm gonna read the statement just because I do want to have it on the record because there is so Trumpy, and you were a student of Trumpy statements. Let's read this thing. Santos' lawyer on the New York Times story, quote, George Santos represents the kind of progress that the left is so threatened by, a gay Latino first-generation American Republican who won a Biden district in overwhelming fashion. It's no surprise that Congressman-elect Santos has enemies at the New York Times who are attempting to smear his good name with these defamatory allegations. As Winston Churchill famously stated, you have enemies, good. It means that you stood up for something sometime in your life. Man, there's no refuge of a scoundrel more low than the quotation of Winston Churchill when you're not willing to address any of the actual claims head on. Man, is that just reek of Trump to you? Is that sort of what the Republican Party now does when it's faced with facts that it doesn't like?
It is, as I noted, there's nothing in there that actually denies any of the charges, that offers any sort of evidence. It's just to dispute that anything that is critical is fake news. We should also note that's not actually a Churchill quote. So another fabrication from Santos and his team. What this is, though, is this is where the Trump people and the Republican Party now live. Is that they're not wedded to any sort of facts. It is just bluster, and they try to just talk over it. It's all culture wars rather than dealing with any sort of facts. So in that regard, we can take Santos at his word that he is a supporter of Donald Trump, even if we can't believe much else.
Tim, what has become of the Republican Party when it's one thing to be caught by fabricating your resume and making up where you went to work, where you went to college, or what your charitable organization supposedly is all about. It's another thing to misquote, either intentionally or even unintentionally, Winston Churchill. I mean, the Republican Party has not lost its way when it's starting to malign Winston Churchill. I don't know what to say. I want to play this thing right here. Listen to what Santos said after the Club Q shooting. This is a story. I want to play this sound here, and we'll talk about this. Let's listen to Santos here. We can talk a little bit about it on the other side. I want to get your take on it.
I condemn what happened in Colorado, just much like Pulse at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando in 2016, which I happened to, at the time, have people that worked for me in the club. My company at the time, we lost 4 employees that were at Pulse nightclub. So this is a deja vu moment for me, not something that is really good even going over, because it just brings back such tragic memories. And like I said, I just want to weed out the hate out of our country and our society. There is no place for hate in the United States of America.
New York Times review of news coverage and obituaries found that none of the 49 victims of that shooting at Club Q appear to have worked at the various firms named in Congressman-elect Santos' biography. I mean, this is a story about he's gone pretty low. That seems like maybe a new depth of lowness to be making up stuff along that line.
Yeah, the Times story included a lot of funny white lies that are fun to mock, and making fun of him for misquoting Churchill is pretty mockable and fun. This is one that got my blood boiling the most, right? And for starters, what a horrible lie. And he's just like begging to be caught. And what are the odds that you happen to work with 4 people that were, caught in Pulse? It seems like an easily checkable lie. But to, basically the question that came before that answer, was about, why he wasn't supporting, more, different gun laws to address this, whether he's concerned about the Republican Party's rhetoric aimed at, LGBT plus Americans. And so he's essentially using the deaths of the people at the Pulse massacre as like the shield, like protect himself for having to have accountability for what the Republican Party has been, dabbling in their anti-LGBT rhetoric, and as a shield for himself for his lies about his resume. So it's extremely sick. And the one other one that caught me you didn't mention, which I think it moves this from just kind of lies and fabrications into potentially some legal questions, is he also was charged with theft in Brazil. I believe the story in the Times was that he stole checks allegedly from a elderly person that his mother was nursing, and used those checks to buy shoes. Also in the story, it said that he had some rent that he hadn't paid. He had back rent that he owed some of his landlords recently. And yet the guy gave himself $700,000 for his campaign this year. So it's like, how does a guy that had to steal checks to buy shoes and can't make rent, loan himself $700,000? I think there are a lot of other investigative questions that are coming down his way as well.
Yeah, I think that's right. And Tim, I honestly, we got to get to a break right now, because honestly, God, I'd say it's stunning how much is coming out that is proving just how much House of Lies Congressman-elect Santos' whole life turns out to be. We'll get to